lost and a financial cost that is yet to be world. According to the IMF and the World Bank, the Ukrainian economy itself will contract around 45% this year. Meanwhile, the Russian central bank estimates its economy will contract anywhere between 4 and 6%. And amidst all this, we're here at ET Now decoding the cost of war. The Finance is our consulting editor here at ET Now, and Maroof Raza is consultant and strategic into the war with Russia. Ukraine may be on life support, but it's not like the world is reeling. It's dealing with acute food shortages, with inflation hitting the roof, living with fears of a mishap that could possibly come soon. In your assessment, Maroof, who is actually gaining from this war, politically, economically? Why is it still...
But let me try and sort of keep it to a few bullet points. $1 billion, which is more than what the US has put anywhere else in the last decade. Afghanistan, for instance, drew in something. Some of it goes for humanitarian assistance, but a lot of it goes channeled back to the American defense industry. And that needed a shot in the arm because America was looking for another war which would allow their defense industry to continue to keep rolling. Secondly, as far as America is concerned, the humiliation of the withdrawal from Afghanistan needed for them another geopolitical shot in the arm, European community, and provided them direction and leadership when the European community was yet to make up its mind whether it wanted to be a global player. Concerned, the Russians, on the face of it, if we read Western press, it tells you that the Russians are basically, just with oil and gas prices being nearly double of what their excavation price, so that it can burn Russia out and remove it completely as a threat to the European continent, which European countries also want for a long, long time. China is waiting and watching to see or can Russia survive, because either way, China, at the same time, China is looking for Russia to draw closer. Remember America and Vietnam. So these kind of short and of big powers, but they don't eliminate them from the geopolitical equation. So broadly, that is it. There is inflation. There is going to be possibly a recession in the West. Of it not looking too bad. Remember, Ukraine is the granary of Europe and perhaps better part of the world. And Putin had gambled on taking control of 30% of the world's grains that came from Ukraine. So Ukraine was a sort of Saudi Arabia of grain to the world. And Putin had also calculated that the sunflower oils, etc., that come from Ukraine is very important for the cooking.
Maroof, it was a gamble. It seems to be paying off as far as America is concerned. Another $3 billion getting pumped is offering. The Russian defense minister on his part saying that the slowdown. Understand why? How do you read into it?
It's very, very difficult not to agree with Maroof, the way he has put it. We want to understand what actually is happening in Ukraine and situation really as to where it has led to understand the whole. Number one, why did the war start? The war began basically with Ukrainian insistence on joining NATO, which was seen by Russia as a security challenge to Russia, and that started the war. That has not yet been resolved. Russia is still there. Ukraine is not intimidated. Zelensky is enjoying the world stage, and so are other countries for supporting Zelensky. Russia is embroiled. You keep on hearing about the bombings here, the bombings there. The only thing who suffered are the people in that. Number three, who benefited out of the entire thing? $5 to $50 billion has gone to the arms industry. Is no resolution of what actually it began with. Corruption. Maroof mentioned wheat, fertilizers. Ukraine was the largest supplier of fertilizers to India, and we don't have it anymore. And therefore, Indian agriculture itself is suffering, Indian business is suffering. So there is a whole lot of disruption of the agricultural sector. A lot of equipment to the space sector came from Ukraine. So therefore, there is a great disruption of the supply chains. One single cause which can be thought of as a contributor factor to the global recession is Ukraine war.
It certainly is. In fact, talking about recession, Mr. Goel, I want to bring in Mythili because of the paucity of time. Mythili, in its effort to penalize Moscow, the West has Russia from persisting with the war, though reports indicate that Russia's economy is suffering its greatest shock since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. But perhaps that's part of the rhetoric. Last month, Russia has deflation of 1917 is what we hear. Now, as determined as the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, other central banks are to crush the inflation from spiraling energy costs, even though the companies, what are the long-term effects that you see on the global economy? There are widespread ramifications for the bond markets too, especially because...
Oh, yes, indeed, Vikram, you're right, and I agree entirely with what Maroof and Ambassador Goel have said. But I'm confining my comments only to the economic fallout of the war in Ukraine. On the rest of the world, especially India. So clearly, the world is not going to escape the impact of the war in Ukraine. India. At the same time, whenever there is uncertainty in the world, the US dollar strengthens. When the US dollar strengthens, emerging market currencies like ours weaken. So that impacts us again. So inflation all over the world, and also the very looming threat of recession in the Western world, particularly because their economies have been hit so hard. We, winners at the end of it all, but the rest of the world is clearly suffering because of US act, egging on perhaps Europe to take...
This war is not over. We have no sight of the war ending. Going towards Ukraine, it seems like the war is going to drag out. In the meantime, besides the massive loss of lives, which of course is the most tragic part of any war. Mr. Goel and Mythili, thank you very much for joining us with your perspectives on this. We'd love to have a longer discussion, but for the paucity of time, Maroof, do stay with us because...